Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Lara, for the kind invitation, and congratulations on the Alberta Glycomics Institute. It's great to be here and give this talk. My talk would be very different to what you have seen probably previously, analyzing natural glycans. So my lab, we focus mostly on designing polymers, and we try to incorporate sugars in the polymer so that we can reduce the toxicity and also try to exploit some recognition of those sugars to other receptors on cells. So I am in the Department of Chemicals and Materials Engineering, and I recently also started a company which is called Glycobiologics, which is mainly focused on the technologies that we have worked on several years. So like I said, my work is really on the molecular engineering of polymers. So we are interested in making the material, okay? And so as you can see in the example here, so we have a polymer which is a carbon-carbon backbone, and we have the sugars as a pendant group. As you can see here, we have a galactose which is attached to the polymer. So if you look at these two structures, you would say, oh, they are the same, but they are actually very different, right? Not only in terms of the arrangement of the different monomers in the polymer, but also in their properties, not only physical, but also biological properties. So we have designed these kind of polymers to do drug delivery, but we have done quite a bit of work actually for gene therapy. So as you can see, this is a cationic glycopolymer, and what is nice about these polymers as compared to using natural polysaccharides such as chitosan, which is already cationic, we can have a bit more control in the composition of this. If you look at a polysaccharide, you have the same, like chitosan, you have the same repeating unit, and you can maybe have different molecular weights, but the structure is the same, right? But here we can actually control the composition, so we may have different contents of the sugar and, for example, the cationic part, which is the red part there. Not only that is we can also control the arrangement. So you can see we have a B and a statistical and a block copolymer. So the block copolymer basically is we have one segment which is a glycopolymer, and the other segment is the cationic chain. And so when you complex these polymers with a DNA, plasmid DNA, messenger RNA, microRNA, or siRNA, the nanoparticles that are formed, the polyplexes, what we call them, they are very different, right? So with the one with the block copolymer, you tend to have a higher distribution of sugars on the surface. And this is important because you want to reduce the cationic charge on the surface. If you have more cationic charge, what we found, they are more toxic, and also they tend to aggregate fairly quickly in the presence of serum protein, right? Not only that, you want also to have the sugars to have the recognition on the surface. So we have done quite a bit of work, for example, on targeting asialoglycoprotein on liver cells. So we have seen that when we have more like a higher distribution of the sugars on the surface, we have a higher uptake in the cells, and we have higher transfection. So my lab, like I said, is we are developing those synthetic glycopolymer for different applications. One of them is looking at nucleic acid therapeutics. And we exploit the carbohydrate here for the high stability in complex fluids, and also for molecular recognition purposes. And it is very important to have a well-defined structure, and we use precision chemistry to make those polymers, so we have very good control on the molecular weight, and also we have very good control on the architecture, the composition of the polymer. I know it's not as complex as the sugars our previous speaker has talked about, but we are kind of looking at a different aspect of these materials. So you have seen recently, with COVID, the messenger RNA has been a huge success as a vaccine. And currently, the lipids has gained popularity again. They were kind of forgotten somehow, and then now they are again back in the spotlight. However, there is a lot of issues with lipid as well. If we just put aside the litigation or the limitation of using them, so there's a lot of companies now, they are interested in exploiting, polymers, because they feel that if they go towards lipid, there would be some issues in the exploitation as a product. So there has been an increase of polymer usage for that reason. Also, the lipid does not protect that well, the cargo. I don't know if you know, the inoculation, usually we have to deliver a lot of mRNA. A lot of it actually is degraded, and before, it doesn't, give you the protection for a long time. But there's a problem also with the polymers, right? The polymers is actually make it too stable. The complexation make it too tight. You have to have a balance, right? You need to deliver those cargo, but at the same time, they have to be released, and so that you have the biological output that you want, right? So that's kind of what we are working on, is trying to make these polymers protect those nucleic acid cargo, and then also see how they work. The other example that I'm going to talk about is on drug therapeutics. We have been also working on using glyco-nanoparticle, and this is more like a glyco-nanogel. So the core of this nanoparticle is a temperature responsive core, where we can encapsulate a high dose of the drug. And here the drug that we are interested is a radiosensitizer that actually focusing on hypoxic tumors. So we sensitize those hypoxic cells and make them more receptive towards chemo and radiation therapy. And what we have seen is when we have this nanoparticle, we offer a better production of those drugs, because the drug itself is sensitive towards degradation. So we have done quite a bit of work on that. And we have also done quite a bit of work on developing hydrogels, glycohydrogels for cell encapsulation and tissue engineering. I'll give you one example of that as well. And we have also developed different strategies to make glycosurfaces, mostly for antifouling and antibacterial surfaces. And we use a prebiotic chemistry to make those surfaces, which is quite interesting. Like we can quickly functionalize surfaces, any kind of surfaces, but also we use a dopamine chemistry. I'm not going to talk about this aspect in this talk, but I will focus mostly on the drug therapeutics, hydrogel, and the nucleic acid therapeutics. But before I talk about the glycopolymers, I want to mention about this polymer, which is a derivative of chitosan. And why I'm talking about this, currently there is a huge interest, like I said, as compared to using lipids, and to use something like polymer. And we have developed a lot of polymers over the years, but they have not been approved by FDA yet, right? And companies tend to go towards something that is more natural and that is easy to be exploited. And so I've been collaborating with Ovensa, which is a company in Canada, And they have a technology which is trimethylchitosan, and which is very interesting material and very easy to make. And we can also control the degree of quaternization of this polymer. So chitosan itself is not very soluble in water, but when we make trimethylchitosan, it is very soluble in water. So we have been working with this company like for over 4 years now, and so there's a lot of companies, besides lipids, they want to test this chitosan derivative for delivery of microRNA, messenger RNA, and this is worldwide. We have collaboration from the US, Europe, in Asia, Taiwan, Korea, and so on, and Japan. So there's a huge interest, of course, using this polymer. So this polymer is interesting because it is a biodegradable polymer. It is easily quaternized and to make it more soluble. And once it is quaternized, we can complex it with negatively charged cargo, right? But we have also encapsulated a variety of drugs in that, and including peptides in that with that polymer. What is nice about this polymer, it is also easily functionalizable, so you can have different types of ligands on the surface of this nanoparticle, and it has been used for IV, intranasal, different modes of delivery. If we look, they have very nice properties for this polymer, especially there's a lot of work that has been done in RNA therapeutics, and what is nice, it is mucosal adhesive, so you can easily deliver nanoparticle to the brain. Now, as you all know, there's a huge challenge to deliver nanoparticle to the brain, and but the triosan seems to have some benefits if we also encapsulate a peptide, B1R and B2R. So it's in collaboration with a colleague in University of Sherbrooke. If we have those peptides, so the nanoparticle can have higher accumulation in the brain. So there is a lot of work that has been done with this polymer, and we have done transfection with siRNA, mRNA, and we also use these peptides to help in the delivery of to the brain. So as you can see, so different targets also has been attached, and as I mentioned, so the B1R and B2R has been quite a successful story in getting those nanoparticles to the brain. Now, my lab currently, what we are interested is, one thing that people are interested is to look at the stability. You all know that when the lipid mRNA nanoparticle became very useful for the COVID vaccine, the stability was an issue. It was stored at -80, which is not convenient, for everywhere. And so one thing we were interested is, can we increase the stability of those nanoparticles? There's a huge interest now to have nanoparticle actually in the solid formulation, and also for intranasal delivery, and especially for countries like where it is really hot, like 40 degrees in South America, Africa, in India, and so on. So there's a huge interest on that, and so one of our mandate is really to look at the stability of the cargo over time. So here I'm just showing stability over 8 hours, but we have done stability over like 7 days. And there's also a plan also to do that over, well, we actually have done, with mRNA, we have done over a month stability. But there's also a plan to do this solid formulation. When we make these nanoparticles, very important to have not only the cargo is stable, but the size also doesn't change over time, right? Especially in the liquid formulation, most of the time you can have aggregation and precipitation of these nanoparticles. So this is one thing that we are interested is looking not only at the mRNA, not only at the stability of the cargo, but also the aggregation over time. So here we have the flash freeze. So if we, I'm just showing you here the flash freeze. The flash freeze actually is quite interesting. It prevents the aggregation. So if you prepare your nanoparticle and you flash freeze it and store it, there's no aggregation. But if you just take it and it slowly cool down, what we observe is that we have an aggregation over time. So which is not good, you know, like especially based on our experience, if we have anything above 400 or 500 nanometer, you don't have this biological performance as you will have like stable small size nanoparticle. So here is an example to show you also that we have done it -20 flash freeze, 4 degrees, 37, and at 37 degrees, it slowly degrades. What was very interesting for me is I had no idea. So I came to know this is, so they made these, you know, from Pfizer and Moderna. The nanoparticle actually, the lipid nanoparticle are stored at -80, and then it's sent to the pharmacy, and it's stored at 4 degrees for a period of 1 month, right? And I was very surprised by that, like not even -20, right? And they use it. Of course, if they use one vial, they have to finish it for the day, but the other vials they haven't used, they can store it at 4 degrees over time. So, but there's a huge interest on that. So the company Ovensa and other collaborators are interested to look at the stability. So we have done mRNA, siRNA stability. Currently, we are also working on microRNA stability as well. I'm not going to spend too much on that aspect of the chitosan. So just coming back to our work, so this is a recent study that we have done using the glycopolymer we have developed in our lab. And so we make this hyperbranch glycopolymer. In the field of gene therapy, it's well known that when you have a branch structure, it tends to work better as compared to a linear structure. So we made that. What is nice about this structure is like it is a redox responsive nanoparticle. So it will, once it is internalized in the cell, it is degraded by glutathione, so releasing the cargo. And we made different nanoparticles. We look at the toxicity, the size, and so on. What is nice, we found with this transfection, or gene knockdown, if you want, what is very interesting with working with synthetic polymers, if you have different molecular weight or different composition, they may behave very differently. The same structure, everything is the same, but just changing the parameter, you know, molecular weight or the composition, it changes a lot in the biological output, right? And so you see we have 3 different polymers, but they are same, you know, same composition, but they give very different biological output. So for example, the HRRP2, you can see that we have the highest gene knockdown. Here we are looking at EGFR expression, knockdown on HeLa cells, and as compared to 1 and the 3, which doesn't work, right? 4 also work a little bit better. And we compared that with lipofectamine, which is like a positive control. So these results are quite interesting. And so our collaboration with Ovensa allow us to do some in vivo experiments. So we did some in vivo experiment. In this case, we look at GAL1 knockdown. And as you can see, the triazine HRP combination when we have the free times, we have this is in vivo data, huge knockdown. So we still have to do a bit more work on this, but this is quite promising. Having this HRP, which is a hyperbranch glycopolymer, but also redox responsive, so it is degraded much faster. The triazine, the molecular weight, and the molecular weight of this HRP is lower. It's like 10 to 20K, right? Compared to the triazine, it is 50 to 150K, right? So the degradation is easier, and then it releases the cargo much easier. So this is about the one example on the nucleic acid delivery therapeutics. The next I'm going to talk about is a work in collaboration with Professor Dennis Hall from the Department of Chemistry. He has done a lot of work on boronate esters, and we have been particularly interested in the benzoperoxole. What is interesting with this benzoperoxole is it has a higher binding affinity with diols, and as you know, sugars has a lot of hydroxyl groups, so we use that complexation to make new materials. And what is interesting is, as compared to boronic acid, this one has much higher affinity to the diol on the sugar. So before we had like very simple sugars we work on, like they just are open ring gluconolactone. We can quickly make these gels. And what is interesting about these gels, they are pH responsive, they are redox responsive, they are sugar responsive. So this is one example we reported in the literature. And in combination with Professor Ishihara from University of Tokyo, we have designed a different approach. So we make the polymers, before we mix everything together. The next approach was we make these two different polymers. So one with the sugar, one with the benzoperoxole. We mix them, we can have the gel. And like this gel is self-healing and is responsive to different conditions. And more recently, we work on a more strained diol, which is the nopal diol, in combination with the sugars, everything. What we found is that when we have a strained diol, we have a much higher stability of these gels. What is very surprising, probably, if you work with boric acid before, you know that you always have to work in a basic condition so that it's stable. When you move to the acidic condition, it degrades, right? Like you don't have this interaction anymore. With the benzoperoxole, the interaction is at neutral pH. It is stable. But when we have the nopal diol, which is a second monomer there, which is a strained diol, we can have these conversion of the benzoperoxole with the diol even at a pH of 1. If you look at the nopal diol here, which is really surprising for us, we got 60% conversion even at a pH 1.5. And but if you look at the other sugars, we don't have any conversion at that pH, right? And so this is very interesting data for us. And we look at the responsiveness at different condition, pH, sugar, H2O2, and we also look at a drug release experiment from the gel by selectively degrading the linkages, the cross-linking. So, for example, if you're working at 7.4, inside the cells, probably it is around 5 or 6 pH 6. One bond will be broken. It releases the cargo, but the gel is more intact, but probably slightly less rigid or something like that, right? We have also looked at the toxicity of the polymer, the cell encapsulation, and so on. So which is, I found, a very neat study, and we hope to continue on working with this nopal diol in combination with the sugar for other drug release. So the final project I'm going to talk about is this hypoxic tumors using a nanotheranostick drug. And just a brief overview on hypoxic tumors. Hypoxic tumors are mainly a region which is poorly oxygenated, and this is due to abnormal vascular structures and inadequate oxygen supply. So, which makes those cells very resistant to therapy, and most of the cancers actually, cancer remissions is due to this inability to kill those hypoxic cells. So if you look the oxygen level in different organs, and then in hypoxia you can see the oxygen level is much lower as compared to the normoxic cells. There are some drugs which are called radiosensitizers that actually become active only in hypoxic condition. They have no effect, supposed to have no effect on normoxic cells, but some of them are still toxic. Anyway, so they are electron affinity compounds that selectively sensitize hypoxic cells while having no effect on oxygenated cells. And these are the properties. Ideally, you want to have a low amount of this drug delivered specifically to the hypoxic cells. And so these are some examples of those drugs. And we are mainly focusing on the middle one, which is the IAZA, which is iodoazomycin arabinose. As you can see, it is a sugar molecule, which is connected to a nitroimidazole. And also you can see that we have a carbon-iodine bond, which is very labile. If you administer this drug, most likely that this carbon-iodine bond will break. And what is nice about the iodine is it can be used for both therapy and imaging purposes, depending on the isotopes that you have. So we have been working with this compound. This drug is lipophilic, so we are able to encapsulate it in our nanogel. And so, like I said, this using the same molecule is unique. So we can use 123I, 124I for imaging, 127 for radiosensitization, and 131 for radiation therapy. So our goal is really to have a controlled release of the drug over time. We provide molecular stability of the drug in physiological condition. And here we're using a galactose-based nanogel, like the surface of the nanoparticle have a dense distribution of sugars, which are galactose. And this work is done in collaboration with my collaborator, Piyush Kumar, and Michael Weinfeld. They are both from the Cross Cancer Institute at UOV. And those are the two students who work on. They have both left. Diana recently got a job in GeneVent in Vancouver. So basically, this is what we did. We make this nanoparticle. So the green part is sugar chains. And we encapsulate, like I said before, so the core of the nanogel is temperature responsive. So at body temperature, it is collapsed. And at low temperature, it is swollen, right? Become more hydrophilic. So this is the structure of the nanogel. So we use a precision chemistry technique to make this polymer, and so that we have a distribution of the glycopolymer on the surface. We have done a lot of optimization of the nanogel so that we have a small size around 60 nanometer. The size change as a function of the temperature. At low temperature, it's more swollen, it's bigger. At body temperature, it's more collapsed. So we look at the encapsulation efficiency. With optimization, we could encapsulate 80% of the drug, and we have like up to 5 millimolar. And we look also at the release of the drug over time, and we look at the stability of these nanoparticles even in serum. So what we have found is they're quite stable because of this dense sugar on the surface, and we have a controlled release. We look at the chemotoxicity in vitro, and what we found when we have the drug, the nano-IAZA, it is more toxic towards the hypoxic tumors as compared to normoxia, right? That's what you want. You want this nanoparticle to deliver the drug in the hypoxic cells. And we have done it in a range of cell lines. One thing is important when we look at the radiosensitization, we look at the sensitization enhancement ratio. So with the IAZA alone, it is 1.4, and when we have it in the nano formulation, it is 1.58. And we have PC3, which is a prostate cancer cell line, and the FADU cell line for this drug. We have also looked at the toxicity of the nanogel alone, right? So we look at the different dose of the nanogel in mice, and we saw no toxicity with those nanogel. But what is left to do now is to look at the in vivo radiosensitization. And so this is our plan, is to look at the in vivo radiosensitization using the nanogel. So I hope I have showed you the different aspects of our work today. And so as I mentioned, I talk about the glycohydrogels that we have made, the nucleic acid therapeutics using both our synthetic glycopolymer, but also using the trimethyl chitosan, and also a nanoparticle formulation for drug delivery. With this, I would like to thank all my collaborators and students, and also all the funding from different sources. And thank you very much for your attention.